Why do we put such emphasis on the living symbol? In the extraordinary process of dream making, the sensation comes in on the flesh, on the body, and it is carried through the transmitters, the neurotransmitters, through the various depots where the exchanges take place, and gradually that sensation comes through to the brain. And that astonishing computer takes that sensation and computes it into an image. An exact image, often put together from our past, our present, and our future. I say an exact image because we are left breathless if we follow our dreams and really understand symbol.
Symbols are to dreams what words are to language. In sleep, we speak to ourselves in the language of symbols. And the key to dream interpretation is one's knowledge of the symbol. When we're actually in a dream, whatever we experience, flying, falling, killing, makes perfect sense. But later, when we recall a dream, it seems meaningless or bizarre. We no longer understand the symbol.
Quite often I dream that I'm flying, which is quite an exhilarating experience, and suddenly it occurs to you that it's faintly ridiculous that you're actually flying.
I start running faster and faster and faster. I don't use my arms much. I don't have any other support except just my body. I flap my arms a little bit, and the longer leaps I take, the higher and the higher and the higher I go.
You're talking about having dreams when you're sleeping. Things like being caught in outer space on a deserted planet.
I've flown. It's a high, right? It's an excellent high.
Like when you're up there, you're all by yourself, and you feel that there's nobody around you.
But that's, again, it's another dream.
I was in a grassy meadow, and it was a very warm day, and I felt very comfortable and happy. And then gradually my feeling changed, and I became edgy and nervous, and this grew even more, and I felt quite panicky and scared. Well, I was terrified. And I knew that by my left foot was a snake, before I'd even seen it. And I glanced down, and sure enough, there it was. It was a horrific looking thing with human eyes and enormous human teeth. And I knew it was going to do me harm.
About a couple of weeks ago, I had a real bad dream about the snakes. And I was afraid that I was going to pass out, you know, because I am just terrified by snakes. When I woke up, I was sweating all over. I was sweating cold. And I was very relieved that it wasn't true.
Tell you a dream? I dream about snakes. Yeah. And, well, when you look it up, it's supposed to mean enemies.
I dreamed that I fell down from the mountains. I mean, I just fell down. I could hold me only with two hands. And then it was so bad I have to wake up because, you know, otherwise I fell. So it must be something which happened before in my life. That's right. All right. I dreamt once that I was, I don't know, some building of some sort. And we were just hanging around over the cliff, like, you know, over the ledge. And then we just fell. We had our foot on top of an eavesdrop. And then the eavesdrop broke, and we just kept on falling. I kept on falling. I don't know about everybody else, but I kept on falling. And that's all.
Okay, I'll tell you the dream. I moved into a house in Montreal, and it had a white staircase. 3 nights in a row, I fell down that staircase screaming, and it never had an end. It was terrible.
I had a dream that I fell off a cliff, and I woke up, I was on the floor. That's about it on dreams.
Tell us a good nightmare.
Yeah, riding on a motorcycle down cobbled streets and then just having no street left and falling. That's awful. But I never hit the ground, which is good. I'm supposed to die.
Dr. von Franz, we've all experienced falling in dreams. What's its symbolic meaning? Is it true we're dead if we hit the ground?
I have experienced falling and not being dead, and being caught up or waking up before I hit the floor or so on. I don't think that's general.
So when you hit the floor, you're not necessarily dead.
No. It simply means a shock collision with reality. If you are too high up, if you have dreams of falling, it always means that you are somewhere too high up. Either you have a too good opinion of yourself, you are megalomaniac, or you have romantic, unreal ideas, or you are living in a make-believe world, or you are living in a theory instead of... You are somewhere missing the contact with reality. And then you have a sudden fall. And sudden fall dreams generally occur together with outer deep disappointment. When one is suddenly kind of faced with reality, naked reality as it is, and that can be a deadly shock to the ego. One can be, so to speak, be blotted out by it for a while, and that will be the death by hitting the floor. The ego is out, has nothing to say anymore.
Now I'd like to turn to one of the major symbols of our culture, the star. What is it that mankind has projected onto the star to make it symbolic?
The realm of the stars was always looked at to be the realm of the eternal divine beings, and therefore in many parts of the world there is the folklore tradition that when you see a shooting star shoot down, that is the moment the soul comes to earth and the child is born. And at the same time, as well in China as in, for instance, in the old Roman Empire, when a remarkable personality died, the astrologers went and looked at the sky for a new star, because they thought that the dying soul would return and become a star in the sky. Or for instance, in the Egyptian death ritual, the prayer goes, "Let me become one of the unsetting star which circles around the North Pole." That is the goal of the dead person, to become one of the never-setting stars. So the star has to do with uniqueness, with the uniqueness and the eternity of the uniqueness of a personality. That has been projected into a star. And for instance, the immortal spiritual part of the psyche was represented in Egypt by the Ba, the so-called Ba, which was either drawn as a bird or as a star, and meant that part of the personality which outlasts death and then accompanies after death the sun god over the sky as a never-setting star.
This is one of the rare dreams in which I heard an authoritative male voice telling me unquestionably what it wanted me to do. I could not understand it. And a voice said to me, "This is your lodestar."
Will you tell us about the Star of Bethlehem?
That fits exactly into that context, namely that when a remarkable, outstanding personality is born, a new star appears in the bright star appears in the sky, and that's how the Magi, the three kings, interpreted it at once. When they saw the Star of Bethlehem, they knew now some outstanding, important personality is born on earth, and that's why they went to see the child. That fitted the general viewpoint of the time. Everybody would have concluded that at that time. A new star, that means somewhere somebody, an emperor or a great ruler or a personality who changes the whole fate of mankind, has come to earth.
I'd like you to interpret a dream now in which the star is the central image.
The dream
It's the most ancient dream in the history of mankind, the dream of Gilgamesh, king of the ancient walled city of Uruk. Gilgamesh was a powerful leader, and they felt his dream was important enough to be inscribed in stone. Here's the dream. In the middle of the night, I walked proudly up and down among my people. There were stars in the sky. Suddenly, one of the stars of the sky god Anu fell upon me. I tried to lift it, but it was too heavy for me. All Uruk assembled around this star, and the people kissed its feet. Can such an ancient dream have meaning for us today?
This dream is about 4,600 years old, and still we can find modern parallels. The language of the unconscious has changed much less than the language of human consciousness has. And so if we interpret this dream from a modern standpoint, we could say that up till the moment where the star fell upon Gilgamesh, he fulfilled a collective role of the king. He was the hero and the king, and that he probably was a very ambitious man. He made a big career. He's the typical man who follows up ambitiously and successfully a collective pattern. Nowadays he would be a great politician or a movie star or somebody, a man who has followed up certain collective alleys and reached a goal. Such a person, looked at from within, is generally very not individual. He's fulfilling a collective role and fulfilling a role of power, reacting in a very collective way. The star, on the contrary, represents, as we saw before, the uniqueness, because every soul has one star in heaven. And we can say that up till now Gilgamesh, with all his collective power achievements, has not yet done anything unique. On the contrary, he has only filled out a typical pattern of the hero king. And now, presumably about in the middle of life, because that's when the most frequently it occurs, something changes. While he's walking around the people, so to speak, proudly of his own power position, collective power position, from the sky falls a star on his back, and turns to be a very heavy load. That is the moment where the unique destiny befalls him, literally falls upon his back. That means from now on one's back one carries a load, and that means he has now, just as Christ had to carry his cross, he has now to carry like his cross the burden of having to become himself, to become the unique, chosen individual he was meant to be, and which he had avoided by being an ambitious collective man up till now. And that proves not to be a glorious call, but to be a heavy burden to him. Now the star means also the immortal soul of man, the eternal. For instance, in Egypt, that part which survives after death freely in the Egyptian world beyond is the bar soul, which is drawn as a star. The star is the eternal kernel of the human psyche, and has always represented that, the unique, eternal man within us. And so he has now to follow his unique destiny instead of fulfilling a collective role. But the people kiss the star's feet. They prosternate themselves before the star, so that it means the real greatness is, there is probably Gilgamesh up till the star fell upon him, also thought he was a great man. He was a king, he was a hero, he was the fortress of his people. And now he has to see, not he is not much. What the people worship is that star stone, that greater thing in him. So that in that dream there is also a little teaching for Gilgamesh. Don't take all the honor people give you for yourself. Don't lap up the compliments they give you for yourself. It is that star upon you, and that is your heaviest load, your necessity to become a unique individual. That's what they worship in you, not you. And so from then on, Gilgamesh becomes the servant of his unique, heroic task, to the search for immortality.
Very few people follow their own star today. Why?
It is easier to admire a great personality and become a pupil or follower of a guru or a religious prophet or an admirer of a big official personality, a president of the states, or give your life for a general whom you admire. That is easier than to follow your own star, because to follow your own star means isolation, not knowing where to go, having to find out a completely new way for yourself, instead of just going on the trodden path everybody else runs along. And that's why there has always been a tendency in men to rather project the uniqueness and the greatness of their own inner self onto outer personalities and become the servants, devoted servants of outer personalities, admirers and servants and imitators.
What is the nature of the personality that receives that projection?
Generally, if somebody has by birth some outstanding qualities, intelligence or some other talents, and in time he or she attract the projection of the star, and people devote themselves to those gifted people and so on, and in that way then comes the great temptation to develop an inflation. An inflation means an overestimation of oneself. Instead of saying my talent isn't me and I haven't, my intelligence isn't me, I have been born with a good computer and that's all there is to it, there is no merit. People identify with their gifts and they get blown up. Inflation means to be blown up like a balloon, and that you see on a minor scale whenever people have a success. Even if a lecturer has a success and so on, he afterwards displays arrogant mannerisms and or condescendent mannerism. You see that he or she has an inflation, and naturally people who have made history, like the Roman emperors, for instance, to take just a historical example, many of them suffered from what one calls the madness of Caesars.
Inflation, then, is having either too high or too low opinion of oneself. But is it possible to get an accurate evaluation of one's own self-esteem or one's self-worth?
Well, the difficulty is that nobody has by nature a very good estimation of his values. Nobody knows how much or how little he or she is. I mean, ask anybody now honestly, are you a great person or are you a small person? How small, how great are you compared to others? They would have to admit that they have no idea. It is a subjective feeling. Either one has an inferiority feeling and one feels the last worm on earth, or one has a superiority complex and then one feels one is elected far above the average, one has to achieve something special, and most people switch between those two. In neurotic people it's extreme, and in normal people it's less extreme, but everybody has days where he feels lousy and below the weather and a nobody, and days where one feels on top of the world, so to speak. That is a natural swing back and forth. and one could call a normal personality where the estimation of oneself is approximately reasonable to compare to what one has achieved, who one is, how the surroundings see to one, and so on. But it's a very indefinite thing, really. Any lack of balance in this respect, when it goes either too far below the mark or too far above the mark, has an irritating effect on the surrounding. If one wants to know if one has an inflation, one has to only see if one gets on people's nerves. Then one is probably a bit overestimating oneself. Or underestimating oneself, because that's the same thing. If one has an inferiority complex, it's really ambition. One wants to be more than one is. One wants to be a great person and knows one isn't, and therefore one feels the last worm on earth. That is just a veiled inflation. Inferiority is a veiled inflation, and therefore also gets on people's nerves. When people sometimes come in and say, oh, well, you know, I don't know, I can't do it. How do you think I can do this? You know, I'm not capable, I'm so stupid, I can't think, and so on. Now, stop that nonsense. Get on with your job. They are really making a conceited dance in form of calling themselves incapable. So it has, again, this irritating effect. So the only measure one can have, because nobody knows who is important in the last view of life, before God, so to speak, who is important or who is not important. Nobody knows.
I'd like to return to something we talked about earlier. You said that it's easier for an individual to follow in someone else's footsteps than to find their own way. What happens when a person projects their own star out onto somebody else? When they project the self out onto another person?
Let's first see the positive side. If the self is projected, one falls into a tremendous state of admiring the person onto whom one projects the self, a kind of incredible fascination and devotion to that person. And that can have the advantage of being capable of learning. If one projects the self, for instance, onto somebody who is really wise or superior, one can learn a lot. That is even the secret of many miraculous cures, that people project the self onto a healer personality, and in the incredible fascination and faith they have into that healer personality, from that faith they are cured from all sorts of psychological or psychosomatic illnesses. So then it serves as a vehicle of promoting the individual. Much more frequently, however, this fascination leads to infantile giving up oneself and being, so to speak, flat on one's belly before the other person, worshipping the great leader or the great spiritual guru or whatever the projection is, and losing oneself in an infantile way. And remaining infantile, such people are generally very fanatical in the admiration of that admired person, defending that person against the enemies and so on, and basking in the glory of their master or admired person through identification. And that saves these people from making an effort themselves. The great man or the great woman out there is going to do it all for me, and my task is to only applaud and admire the thing. I have to make no effort to become more intelligent or more wise or more independent myself. So it can just annihilate the personality and make them infantile instead of make them grow up and develop them. It naturally depends a bit from the person onto whom the projection of the self falls if that person has an inflation and misuses it to breed admirers and followers. It has disastrous consequences. But I know also that there are in the Far East sometimes masters who know about the dangers of the infantile dependence and send those novices and pupils back to their own inner task and don't take the projection, so to speak.
The psychology of one individual can be reflected in an entire society. What happens then to the collective if the self is projected?
Well, then you have either monarchies or leader dictatorships. The kings of all countries, down even to the chief of a primitive tribe, are carriers of the symbol of the self. And you have all the advantages and disadvantages of a monarchical system. The advantages are that such a tribe or population has a unifying symbol of the self which holds them together. That is a projected symbol of the self, and because it's such a deeply rooted need in man to have such a symbol, living symbol of the self. Naturally, for Catholics, the Pope very often represents the symbol of the self as being more of a spiritual leadership than worldly leadership. But that's a split situation in the West. But because there is such a need, you have now, since monarchy has been mostly abolished, we have all the dictators, Napoleon, Hitler. We have always these leader figures which show that people want again or need to project the self onto some leader figure. And that, according to Jung, is an infantile gesture. It's because we want to remain children. We don't want to take the responsibility. Democracy is a very difficult task because it puts the responsibility on everybody, and most people don't want to take political responsibility. They don't want to wreck their brains, but they prefer to think the father state will do it all right. So one likes to project onto a leader. We have a group of leaders, and they are father figures, and they are the self, and they do it all right. Just mental and psychological laziness.
Laziness.
Laziness is, Jung once said, that's the greatest passion of mankind, even greater than power and sex and anything.
In our Western culture, our psyches and our DNA are carrying the symbolism of the Jewish and Christian faiths. In the next two films, we will be looking at the change, the shifting of the symbolism within the culture and in individuals. The foundations of our culture are based on the importance of dreams. In the Old Testament, for example, the priests and prophets, the leaders, believed in their dreams, honored them, and acted on them.